is what sparked you on the journey into making art. Was it punk rock, or were you already interested in art before that?
I was always interested in art, but I never really. This was like the sort of early mid '80s, early '80s. I can't even remember when the bloody years were now. So yeah, it's the early '80s, and for me then, my art was different to the graffiti and things I was doing. They were absolutely unrelated, and I saw art like most people saw art as pictures in galleries or sculptures or performances or whatever in a gallery space or in a theatre space or in a public space. And what I did in the street, which was inspired by like the second wave of punk, like Crass and Conflict and all that lot, that had no connection with the art part of my life. I think the art thing I thought was, this is the grown-up bit. But the other stuff was sort of hanging on to that sort of, well, it's not childish, but it was like it was more fun. Yeah, the work I looked at, this is a job I want to do, but I better not get caught doing this, because this could be a problem if I'm caught, graffitiing in the street or something like that,
Mm. I mean, where was this? Obviously, it's, from your accent, it's West Country.
It's North Somerset, so it's about 10 miles south of Bristol, a few miles from Bath, and a few miles north of Wells and Glastonbury and all that. So it's kind of sort of, it was an old mining community. Farming and mining was there. They had railways, but the railways were only there because the coal was there. And that was essentially being run down and closed down as I was growing up. I think they shut the last mine in my town in the sort of early mid 70s, and then the mines went. Sorry, then the trains went.
It's an odd area, and it's quite rural but quite industrial. And I suppose at that period, it's just slightly tinged with slight hippiness. Is it kind of Glastonbury overflow coming in, or is that before that period?
No. I mean, the Glastonbury thing was further south. I mean, what's also strange, and it's not something that we have now, because we've got the internet, we've got, everybody's got mobile phones, and you've just got this kind of instant communication. There were far more kind of sort of cultural and social bubbles then than there are now. I mean, I think this is only my personal experience. When I was a punk, you went, it was really tribal. Then it was like a fashion, and it was really tribal. And there were loads of we used to call them grebos, rockers, where I lived. And then the mod thing turned up, and punk. I think there was one punk in our town, and he was quite an imposing person. He was really tall, and he was kind of bloke. You sort of see him, and you think, that's cool on a stick. Whoever he is, he's just, he was just. I think it was like a proto goth, So if you can imagine a sort of a muscle-bound John Cooper Clarke with a sort of a silver cane sort of strutting around this town. It was like, wow, what's this about? Most of my generation were like kind of casuals or mods, and they were into the scooters, because obviously that was the kind of sort of hangover from the Quadrophenia film. And I got into that with that bunch of people. But then it didn't fit in with the music I was listening to. And it's like, at that time, like I say, it was so tribal. You wore the clothes that went with your music, that, mixed with your friends, this kind of thing. And I was into different music. And the only place I could listen to it was things like John Peel and stuff like that. And I actually got some real excitement from the punk music. I remember I used to have a little plastic radio that was about this big that I was, given one Christmas or something. And it used to have this horrible plastic earphone that used, I don't know if you remember the little cream things you'd stick in there, and you'd have earache after 10 minutes. And, the reception is terrible. You're always messing with it, so, and you're sort of under the sheets in your bed listening to this stuff. And I don't know, I mean, there was something about the music that was coming out, particularly, you didn't have the opportunity to record it. You would just listen to it. It was almost like it was disposable. And there was an excitement with things. I mean, I can still sort of feel that real rush of, I'm angry about what's going on here, like in this area. You sort of watch the news. We had 3 channels. Well, you had 3 channels. One of them was the BBC Two, which was invariably educational stuff. So essentially you had 2 channels. And you watch the news and you sort of look what's happening around you. And even then, there's this kind of projection in the media that doesn't match up to your expectations and your realizations of what's actually seems to be going on. And I just felt this, it was like somebody else had said it for me. I didn't understand the lyrics because obviously at that time I hadn't bought the albums. And crass, even on the most, remixed high fidelity version of their albums now, they're not the clearest to pick out a lot of the lyrics. At that time, when you're listening on a radio the size of a matchbox, via a piece of plastic, it was the energy. You could pick out the chorus, you could pick out the odd phrase, and it was like, yes, I feel like that. That's how I feel. And it was interesting because I don't think that support of anger, I don't think I've ever felt that since, until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, a month ago, and I heard, what's his name? Benefits. Benefits band did I'd seen a couple of pieces before and I liked them just because it was something more forceful and somebody making something who didn't care about the market. It's like, this is what I want to make. That was an essential part of it. But he did a track called Flag, which just ties in with all the lunacy that's going on now. And it was that exact same feeling again, where you feel it rising in you and your head's going, yes, 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 yes. And it's like, thank God. And it's like music had that connection. And I at the time I was thinking, why is my art concerned with art history? It was a very kind of sort of circular discussion when you're reading about art. It's very kind of sort of inward looking and navel gazing, or it has been up until about sort of 15 years ago. So another big, as well as the text. I mean, there was the stencils that I was cutting. Just basically, I was copying the crass stencil, and my favourite one was I think I brought it out for you actually. My favourite one was I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it? The broken gun.
Yeah.
The broken. I mean, if you're sort of, you're a young teen, and you've got all these ideals, and you know how the world should be and what you want, and the adults are going around the bend doing whatever they're doing, and you think, as a kid, break the guns. Then you see this. I was just like, that design was just so cool. So I thought, I'm having that. And bought the album, found a copy, I think, originally of it, photographed on a stencil on a wall somewhere, and copied it. And I just sprayed it everywhere because I just thought it was so, it said what I wanted to say. but then there was that sense of, why aren't I doing this as well? I can do this. I can draw. So I started making my own. I did have a go at making some sort of image-based stencils, but I'll be honest, they were rubbish. They didn't have that kind of. There were, if you remember, there were a lot of other bands that tried to make a stenciled logo in the same vein as Crass, and 90% of them failed. Because the original was like, no, that works. The other ones are clearly derivative of it, and they don't work. So I just went to the text side of it. So I just started writing silly things. Some of them were funny. I thought they were funny. Some of them were angry. And you do things like, it's like the local dole office, because we had to take the UB40 form. You get your UB40. When you had the album UB40, everything was all feeds into what you do. And so I made a stencil that said UB naughty, and I stencil that on the dole office. I get there before they turn up, stencil that, and then a week later it had been painted over. So like a week later I put it back, and it just becomes a game. That's essentially what it is. And also it was a lot easier to do that then, because there wasn't the surveillance there is now. That's made life, that made life a lot more difficult in that respect through the sort of 90s when that started becoming really prevalent. But no, I mean, I think the other inspiration visually was Winston Smith's graphics for Dead Kennedys. Just like, in art books, I'd read about John Hartfield, who was doing essentially the same thing. But then I didn't connect that to, I looked at it in the sense of how it was being visualized, or how it was being talked about as art, not about why it's being made, but because it's in an art book. With Winston Smith, because it's in a Dead Kennedys album, on the massive poster that came out with it, you understand why it's being made as well. There seemed to be there wasn't that kind of, with punk, didn't seem to be involved in being modulated by the system it's criticizing, which art always was, so art, if it's political, became about, but let's look at the formal aspects, John Hartfield wasn't interested in the formal aspects. He was interested in expressing his politics and why he was angry, and that's what I saw with punk. So, I mean, there's also the issue of I never signed anything. It was anonymous, so it wasn't until I didn't realize the connection between what I was doing then and what I'm doing now until about, I don't know, the turn of the century. That sounds good, doesn't it? The turn of the century. When, we grew up thinking the turn of the century, before the First World War, but no, the turn of the century is 20 years ago. But it's, when we had sort of the rise of kind of urban art, as opposed to just that sort of American-inspired graffiti. And then I got roped into that because of the political aspect of my work. And someone said, have you done any street work? And you say, well, I was a vandal in the 80s. Have you got any photographs? No, because that would be stupid. And I lived in a small town. There's one chemist where you take your photographs to be developed. So I'm not going to waste money on cameras and then take him and say, "Can you develop these for me?" And he says, "Hang on, are these yours?" So no. So and that's where it came from. I mean, the music was intrinsic to making my work now as it is. But at the time, the two were separate.
Yes, so Crass unpackaged a lot, didn't they? It wasn't the music, his initial draw in there, but then G Voucher's amazing sleeves, which for years I thought were actually collages, but they're actually hand painted, aren't they? And I could see there's an influence in your work from what she did there with the colours, the blacks, whites, and monochromatic, the some of the subject matter. I mean, obviously you've taken on a different trip, but I could see it's part of the DNA what you do into her amazing works.
Yeah, I think she's a fantastic artist. I mean, again, at the time, there was also, you didn't really know who did it. That funny noises of the dog in the background. I don't know if you can hear funny noises.
There's one on every scene about it.
Yeah. Harvey. I don't know. And I mean, you didn't really know who was responsible for what within all the Crass packaging. I just, you get the thing, you'd open it up, and it was just an absolute feast of, information, images. I didn't take it on board. I'm trying to think when I first realised, I mean, her name was there, but I just assumed that was another member of the band. I didn't think, or I didn't know that she was absolutely separate. She was responsible for the greater part of, the artwork involved. I also, I mean, it's nice to see that, she's getting recognition critically on a more mainstream scale as well now. She turned up being interviewed on, I think, Radio 4 a year ago. She had an exhibition down south somewhere, and it was like, that was punted out in, the mainstream media, and it's like, good, at last. I think there's less. The art world was very, very rigidly controlled in the sense of what you're allowed to not just exhibit, but what you're allowed to make. It won't be, you're not going to be accepted. I mean, I wasn't accepted into art college. And I think one of the main reasons was because I was taking in photocopied, again, following on from G's work, I was taking in photocopied montages of bits and bobs that were, against the Falklands conflict. And I can remember the lecturer who interviewed me, and he just looked at it in a really sort of patronising way and sort of said, but we don't do politics. Why? Why? We've got all this, this was early 80s, we've got all this crap going on everywhere. Bristol's on fire down the road. Why aren't we doing politics? Oh, no, we don't do politics. Oh, okay.
But there's been a history of it, surely, from Picasso, or lots of artists have used different themes. Of course, not different themes, but there's political themes in art before Crass as well, isn't there? So is that a period when the establishment or the education system didn't embrace it?
It depends, I suppose, on what culture you're from, and also who controls that culture. I mean, you look at things like, and there's some famous video film interviews going back between, let me see, Clement Greenberg, who was sort of the big flag waver for the American abstract expressionists and the major critic of the time in America, arguing with, and this was someone who claimed to have a left-wing perspective, arguing against politics, or particularly the Marxist critical perspective within art in that time. Oh, we don't do that. We don't do that. It's the same thing. It's like, why? If it's about free expression, you've got people like, successively you've got Duchamp saying anything can be art. I mean, that was over a century ago. And it was, I suppose you're looking at then, that was half a century before Greenberg was saying what he was saying. Then you've got Duchamp, obviously a bit late. You've got Joseph Beuys a bit later, who's basically saying anyone can be an artist. Well, if anyone can be an artist and anything can be art, why are we bothering with art colleges?
Yeah.
Why do we need the accreditation? I think that system has been broken. which is a good thing to have it broken, and it feeds in again. There's those connections with punk. You look at all the people who are clearly, who've got something to say, and an interesting way to say it, who previously would not have got any attention at all. It's the wonderful thing about YouTube now. If it wasn't for YouTube, would I have heard of Benefits? No. I think the first time I heard of, the other band, a good example. You look at, it's all up north. It's all up north. Sleaford Mods.
Yeah.
Look how long they've been rattling around. But their stuff was available, by people punting it around and sharing it because of these networks we've got now, which we didn't have before. We used to, obviously, I think most of my record collection in the 80s was on C90 tapes shared between mates. And if you liked it, you went out and bought the album, So I suppose it works in a similar way, but we had a much smaller network and possibility of discovering, really strange out there. There was no sort of, if you like that, you might like this on a sort of autopilot. If you went to your mates, they invariably had pretty much, more or less the same kind of sort of taste as you have.
Over the years, you come from this point in time, but it's developed, hasn't it? You have a very definite style, but there's lots of different nuances within that style, isn't there? Can you talk through those?
I think I have the benefit of coming to attention sort of in my 40s. If I know, I won't name names, but I know artists who were discovered when they were young, and basically they're not being allowed to develop because it involves their galleries having to work a bit harder to sell work that's changing. And a lot of some of these are big name makers. A lot of collectors at that level, they want signature works. They want to be able to tick off the list. I've got X, I've got Y, I've got Z. And they're not allowed to develop, which I think is quite sad. So I've been allowed to mess around and do what I want. I think it's interesting that I still have some reticence. In terms of my drawing, in terms of my visual art, I'm happy to just mess around, see what happens. If I get another interesting idea, I'll try it. If I think it works, I'll progress it. If it doesn't, I'll shelve it. I won't get rid of it. I'll just put it away. Perhaps I can get it out, 5 years' time. I'll try again with this, see what happens. But I still have reticence outside of visual art. It's like I write a lot, but I don't think I've got. No, I know I haven't got. I haven't got I haven't got the confidence to argue to the same degree for my writing. It's like poetry and prose, as I do for my visual art. I think I can a bit more than I used to, and also music. I would love to have the talent to play a musical instrument, but then I know, there's huge problems in terms of will I ever be confident enough to do what I want to do with a musical instrument. And it's like, I don't think I've been painting and drawing for all my life, and I'm still learning. So I don't think taking up the cello now is going to be I think it's a challenge too far, I think. My son's a musician, he's up at your neck of the woods, and I kind of live through that aspect of what I think I would have liked to have done through him. You know, I mean, he's one of these people that can just sort of hear a tune and play it, and I'm sort of thinking, but that's his talent, So, I'll find music, I'll send it to him and say, "What do you think of that?" Particularly, things like music that gives me goosebumps, music that really moves me, and I'll send it to him. Now he studied music and he studied music production, and he'll say, yeah, well, that works because they put this chord next to this chord and they've used this and it makes this happen and you're goose. Shut up. Just, it's like the kid at the back of the magician show going, "The rabbit's in the hat," and it's like, I don't want to know that. I can do that with art. I understand how that works.
Yeah.
Sorry?
You never want to know how the magic is created. It spoils it.
I mean, people say they get some of those kind of sort of emotions from my work. And I know how I'm engineering that, and I can see how other artists engineer it as well. So, I suppose I just have to accept that I'm not ever going to really get that from visual art. But yeah, so I don't want to lose it from music. I don't want it to be, analysed and yeah. I mean, there's so much, wonderful music out there, and I'm always looking for more interesting music. I mean, that was one of the things about punk as well. There's so much that was lumped into this kind of sort of, it's punk, or it's post-punk, and it's hip-hop, and it's like all these, forget your labels, it's just like, is it interesting? I just want interesting music, and if it's, if it moves me emotionally, then that's perfect. That's off, that's really up there, That I think music is more primal, and I think it's more essential to the human condition than visual art is. I know I should be a sort of a flag waver, pardon the contemporary flag waver for visual art, but yeah, they are essentially very different. But yes, they're both forms of communication. But music, there is something absolutely essential and primal at its nature. People don't remember when they saw, I don't know, famous works of art through their life. But music, it's like punctuation points in your life. You hear a piece of music and you think, "Oh yeah, I love that. I remember that." It's much more of us at a core level, I think, than art is. So that's why I wish I could do it, but then I think I'd never be able to do it as well as I can. So I mess around on computers, but I'm happy to consider that organized noise. I wouldn't call it music,
So in a sense, you express your musicality in art, in painting.
I mean, actually, this is the first time since I've been in. This is obviously in my studio. This is the first time in this studio I've been here working without music, ever. Talking to you.
Okay.
So it's all right. All right, you're an old punk, so that works.
I know the tunes already. Yeah.
You hum the tunes. I think I'm thinking along with you.
So
but
does the music inspire you, or does it just give you the energy to create?
Depends what it is. I mean, I've got a ridiculous mix. I mean, I've got a huge. I essentially run on a kind of just a mix. It just goes and rotates. Every time I buy something new, I listen to it and I think that will work in the studio. All that can go onto the mix, and it just cycles through it while I'm playing. And it works well like that because obviously, you could be making something, or I could be making something that's sort of dark and miserable, and then I don't know, perhaps fire up the bass cannon to come on, some mad dubstep thing, and it just, but sometimes it adds to it, and sometimes, otherwise you end up, if I wanted to make miserable art in a miserable sort of audio, and have all the lights out and just work by candle, you end up making something that can become quite sort of mawkish and cliched. It's nice to work within these different things, and also sometimes I don't know, there may be something lurking up. No, that's got my writing on it. I know that I did a huge painting recently, or a huge drawing recently, of a Minotaur woman. Is a character that I've used for a long time. And the track that came up sort of part way through doing it, when it was nearly finished, was Susie and the Banshees, and it was like, "Bring me the head of the preacher man." And I thought, oh yeah, this is good. And I wrote that across the line of the middle of the painting. And it's like a kind of, this happened while I was here. So while I was drawing, I heard this track, and it's all part of it. It all feeds in. Sometimes I'll take the title. If it happens at the end of it, I think, yeah, that's how I remember this one. So yeah, there tends to be a lot of stuff that have Coil titles because I listen to Coil an awful lot.
Yeah, they definitely create an atmosphere, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Coil are a perfect, sort of audio kind of sort of set for my work. I don't think I would ever fast forward or flip onto the next track for a Coil. But I've pretty much filtered everything I buy, and I know that what I listen to, I can work with. I think you're in there somewhere. Your new album's definitely in there, so that's all right.
Interesting to see what painting came out of that.
But I met the music. I don't think I did have ideas a long time ago of making work to. This was a long time ago, where I was dealing with some issues, but there was a bootleg. There was an Adamant bootleg. I think it may have been called Madame Stan or something. Had a black and white kind of cheaply copied, and it was on vinyl with a red label. I think it had Madame Stan written inside, but it had all the old Sex music before Kings of the Wild Frontier, and obviously before even Dirt Wears White Socks. And there's an incredibly dark version of Red Scab on it. There's a very punk version of Christian Dior on it, and it's like, this is something special. And it's sort of, there was other tracks on there that fed into things I was doing in my personal life. And I wanted to make an album. I wanted to make a collection of works based on the kind of inspiration of this album. And also a lot of musicians, particularly like the punk lot, they're good writers. They're good lyricists. Sometimes you hear a line that is just like, oh, that's perfect. And it's like you want to share it. Here's a good line, have that, put it on there. I won't lay claim to it. If someone says, what's that? And I'll say, oh, it's a line from, Swans or, whoever, there's Leonard Cohen stuff. There's stuff. Some of the lines by the Handsome Family, the alt country stuff. Some of the lines they've ever come up with are just like, there's a cathedral in Cologne looks like a spaceship, like the hand of God came down from on high, or something like that. And it's like, if you've ever seen that church, it's like, that is the most perfect description of that building. So yeah, it's like, I'll take some of those lines if those lines mean something to me. I don't start with the song and then make the art about the song. I don't want to illustrate the song. But nothing's fixed in stone. If an idea comes.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Adamant, in that period, because a lot of in a lot of ways that was the last period of the great art school confluence, when a lot of musicians went to art school and ended up doing music and hardly any art. But some of those ideas of art and what art could be were actually transposed into the music, and you're kind of going the other way around. But that flux between art and music was so key from the 60s, through the 70s and through to punk and post-punk. And that was the glory period, wasn't it, of British art school pop culture.
Yeah, I think it was. But I do think now we've got, everything develops, and you kind of, if you're interested in those aspects of culture, you will always seek out what is interesting now. So, that's where it came from then. Now it's coming from just the fact that, you can't see it, but down, along here, there's a keyboard, and I don't mean that keyboard. I mean that kind of key. Well, for me, it's that kind of keyboard. There's audio boxes and bits and pieces around. I can afford to buy it. It's not expensive kit. It's like all the freeware to make music. It's available to buy. And it's or clobber. If you've got to clobber it. So there's. Also, now there's the platforms for people to share what they make, whether it's writing, whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's a mixture of film, any of it. It can be got out there. You might have to try a bit harder to find it rather than just relying on YouTube algorithms to churn it up for you. But it's out there. If someone puts something on there, they know well enough to, if I put these words in as search terms, hopefully this will turn this up. So you hope the person that is looking for these 3 words will find my work. So I'm trying to think what bands have I discovered that I wouldn't have discovered. But I say bands, probably through looking for intentionally just something a bit more interesting. Sev Deliza. I don't know if you know Sev Deliza. She's Iranian. She has the most incredible capacity to produce. Look up Sev Deliza. I think she's Iranian, Dutch, and she may be living in America, but she was performing in France recently. I don't know, it was all over the place. But her work is absolutely...
She's a poet as well.
No, she's more of a musician than a poet. Obviously, she does write. Yeah, she writes the lyrics to her songs, but the vocals tend to be so processed that's lost in the sense of this sounds good. It's like Coil. Yes, there were vocals in there, but they were kind of ancillary to the sense of listen to the experience it in a whole. It's not like the lyrics are important or the song's important. Is experience it in the whole. Another band I discovered that I found like that. It's a bunch of crazy French. They're called Igor. I don't know if you know Igor. This is if you like Frank Zappa. If you want Frank Zappa, well, no, I was never a fan of Frank Zappa. There were some funny tracks.
I like the idea more than the music. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, this is it. This is fixed. Igor have fixed that. Okay. So they've taken the idea, but then they've added levels of production and lunacy. There's a band. There's a new band. Is it Midi Black or Black Midi?
Black Midi, yeah.
Imagine them, but I don't like to say it's different. It's very different, but there's a similar kind of it's like modern electronic hyper processed controlled jazz, sort of. I don't know how you describe it, but Igor also take it into they bring in Baroque music, but they also bring in like black thrash metal. It's off the scale for odd. But if you take an Igor album and you sit down and you listen to it, it's just joy. It's just wonderful to listen to. That you cannot challenge. Well, I say this from a non-musician. As a non-musician, I don't think you can challenge the musical, technical ability. But to make something that's kind of, it's like controlled noise.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's got aspects of industrial. It's got aspects of black metal, and then it goes back. Say you've got Baroque stuff coming into it. It's all over the shop. One thing he did, which was fantastic, I think it was called the Chicken Symphony. A child's toy piano, this big, in a garden, sprinkling chicken food or corn on the keyboard. So chickens come up and start pecking the keys, and then start using that as the basis to make a piece of music. And then, you know, have that in the video as well, just this chicken. And it's just like, it's typically French. Only a French band could have done it. You know, I sort of say to my friends here, I said, they're French. They go, yeah, they're French. And it's like, yeah, they are, they're French. No one else could have made this music and presented it the way they did, you know. So, yeah, Igor, apparently the name is his hamster when he was a kid with extra R's on the end. I don't know why. I think it's IGORR or RRR. I can't remember. So they're worth checking out. So check out Sevdaliza and check out Igor. You know, you won't be disappointed. But then I can also go to like kind of sort of more traditional kind of soft songwriting, things like Perfume Genius. You know, I mean, the first two albums of Perfume Genius, they are some of the most beautiful, plaintive, sad songs that are made without trying to be that. You know, it's just like they're honestly felt. And I think that's the key. That's what punk was about. It was like, we feel this, you know, we want to make this. You know, sometimes it's more art house. You know, you look at things like Wire, and they were interesting for it. But even then, you know, they could do sort of off the wall. Oh, this is funny. Oh, yeah, this is funny. We're doing this for no other reason than it's funny. It's not The Fly. This is not. You know, this is not art house. It's just funny. You know, and there was no problem then with that kind of. You know, people didn't have, and punk didn't have in general. There are exceptions to every rule. Bands that kind of set out to sort of say, "Oh, we have to control our identity and our logo, and we've got to have this brand." You know, I mean, I know Crass were accused of it, but I don't go with that. I mean, you've only got to look at the third album where it went to being basically a feminist album, and all the lyrics were done by all the vocals were done by the women. Mm-hmm. You know, so if you were used to Larry Punk, and then it's like, hang on, what have we got now?
yeah.
You know, and then you've got all the Bullshit Detector albums, which is just like, have a go. You know, so yeah, there are some bands that try to control it, and you know, there's like artists as well that try to control everything. But I think it's more interesting, and that's what I want to do, which is just like have a go, see what happens.
So is that, you know, that development of taste and music that you've got experience from the punk days to now, is that development matching your art? Does your art move to different places, different reasons, different themes? Or do you find actually there's specific areas that you just work within because that's what you do?
There's areas that are comfortable to work in. But there's always areas I want to go. There's areas I want to go to, and there's areas I stay away from. I don't want to get into too much. It's easy to say conceptualism, but then everything should be conceptual. Everything has an idea behind it, even if it is, I just want to sell shit. You know, I just want to keep cheese on the table, or you know, wine in the fridge. You know, whatever. But sculpture I've always been scared of, because again, is that music thing. I know there's people that can do it far better than I know I can at the moment, and I think I'd always be making something that is trying to be what somebody else has already done. You sort of think, oh, I like that. Oh, yeah, I wish I could do that, and I'll have a go at it. I've done it once or twice, and I didn't have the technical ability to stop the thing falling apart after it sat in a cupboard for a few months. Get it out, and it's like, oh right, it's a stick. I'm having a go at that again, and it's the same with music. It's that same thing. It's like, why shouldn't I do it? Why shouldn't I do it? The tools are there. I don't see any difference between making art about a subject in any possible medium there is, or with any tools that there are. I probably don't do fluffy watercolors. I don't.
You can try.
but again, there's these things that you have ideas about, and then you think about it a bit longer, and you think that is such a bad idea. I did think once I could do some watercolors. I don't know when it was. It was probably when there was another war off on its merry way from our glorious leaders. And I thought I wanted to make some watercolors, but I'm not going to use watercolor. I'm going to use my blood and thin that down. And I thought, yeah, stick it to the man, use your blood. Then you sort of think, this is such a cliche. No, that's just really, really. It was just like in my head after I'd thought about it for a little while. No, it's too obvious, and it is literally no. But bizarrely, I think it was probably a year after I considered the idea that someone did have an exhibition of watercolors made with their blood in some big commercial London gallery, and everybody was oohing and everybody was oohing and ahhing.
Yeah. Pete Doherty, wasn't it? Yeah.
I don't know, was it? Yeah. I can't remember.
Yeah, I remember he did it, didn't he? Yeah, yeah. So what's your typical days? Is it very productive, or do you have days when you just have the blank piece of paper and you're staring into space, or is it always is quite a lot of work on the go there? Yeah.
There's always. I mean, this is stuff I'm immediately working on. I mean, can you see those there on the wall? I don't know what you can see.
You can see
those on the wall back there. I mean, that's part of. I look like Eric and Ernie when I did that, didn't I? That's a part of 50 drawings I've got to do for a show in this summer in east of France. So yeah, that's the 3 that are currently being worked on. These are just other work that's ongoing. So, but behind it, there's a pile of, there's always stuff work. I'm never sat here looking for things to do. Generally, get up, make a loaf of bread, water me vegetables. It's like the good life here, mate. I start whistling like Tom Good. On a related note, best band names never came to full fruition. There was a band in the village, in the town near where I used to live, and I thought they had the best name ever, but they never really made it. Velocity Rendell. What a name for a band. Anyway, so I go out, water the plants, come back in, and essentially, then I'll start working in here. So music's on, just work through the day. I try to finish. I mean, it used to get ridiculous when we first moved here, which was 14 years ago. It was the first time where I hadn't had to do another job to support my art. We left the UK, came here, and I was doing this all the time. And I kind of went a bit mad. I'd had all this kind of sort of pent up wanting to be making art all the time. Now I was able to, and it became crazy. It was 7 days a week. I'd start, 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd be working till 9 o'clock at night. And it was really damaging to our relationship. It was ridiculous. It was insane. it was just like it all become me, 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 me. And I thought, I come to this country with the person I love, and it's just no. So that had to stop. So essentially now I work up until 6 o'clock. Then I can stop, go and start cooking, because I like to cook at the end of the day, make some food. That's how I sort of sort my day out. Then in the evening, I'll sit down and rat around the internet and see what's lurking there. If I'm in the bath, I'm thinking about my art. If I'm on the garden, I'm thinking about my art. So the creative process is just there all the time. I've got notebooks with me. If I have an idea, if I have an idea for a title or a theme, I'll just take a note of it and put it there. I've always got a camera with me, so if I see interesting, I've been painting a lot, or I've been drawing a lot of work that's about more overtly about the sort of climate chaos that we're in at the moment, and worse to come. And I'm incorporating storms into the imagery of what I'm painting. Well, where I live is essentially on the top of a hill. It's the highest point in Brittany. So it's pretty good here for some mad skies. So I've always got the camera to photograph, anything dramatic that I see that I can use later on. So yeah, I'm never stuck looking for ideas or work.
Speak of ideas, you get the image in your head and you create it on the blank canvas, or do you actually just put a line and see what that suggests, or both, or a mixture?
I was talking about this the other day to someone, and it's like the only way I can describe it is I don't have an image of what I'm going to make in my head. I have an idea of things I've seen. It could be something off the television, it could be a film, it could be an advert, it could be a wonderful bit of photography by someone. I think, I like that form, that idea. Could be one of my own pieces. If I could do that, and it sort of does this, and add it with that, and I think that's what I want to do. So then I'll start and just essentially start messing around with ideas. I know it sounds really horribly wanky and horrible. It's like jazz, man. But it's like that. You have all these kind of sort of influences, and you put it on to see where it goes. I know when it's going wrong, and I stop. And I'll put that away, and I'll get something else out and pull out another thing and work on it. Eventually, I'll bring it back again, and I'll start thinking, yes, this was where it was going wrong. This is what I need to fix. So I fix that area and then carry on again. So it's like a continual process of sort of making something, and then you break it, and then you've got to mend it, and then you break it again. So then you have to mend it again. So it's like breaking, mending, and hopefully you stop at a point where there's more mended bits than broken bits, and you've left it at a point where you think, I'm happy to say that's probably the best it will be. It probably won't be, because invariably, there's work of mine that's turned up in auction, and also people share stuff on the internet. And I look at old work and you think, can I have that back, please? I want. Everything what you want to change. You want to make everything perfect, but it can never be perfect. So you just have to let it go. You think, okay, the next time I do this, I'll do it that way. So it's there's no fixed idea. There's fixed inspirations, and there's fixed things you want to say. I suppose it's probably trying to find the best way to say those things. So sometimes it can be kind of sort of quite. There's stuff I've made that no gallery will go near because it's just too dark and it's just too angry. And also because of the subject matter. I did stuff about the attack, attacks, military attacks where kids have died, and basically you've got video transmissions from journalists that are there, and they don't focus on it. They don't need to. I can't imagine their job. They don't want to focus on it, but they've got to hear this is happening, and then they'll go somewhere else. That's you can't focus on it because they're there. They're seeing it firsthand. But occasionally, if you start, I would take video captures, and I think, right, I'm going to focus on that. There was one horrible, terrible thing I saw once where, just for the rationalization of, doing the good work they're doing. I think it was some United Nations body. It was somewhere in Africa, I'm sure it was. And there was, I think it was in some sort of small hut somewhere. There was bodies there. And they obviously just had pieces of paper on them with numbers on them. It was kids, and they had numbers on them. It's just like, it was, and it was just sort of it just scooted over in a video. And it's like, yeah, if I had that job, if I had that crap job of actually having to witness this level that we've come to, that's probably how I'd have to deal with it. Me looking at that video and seeing that, obviously, I'm a step away from it because I'm looking at someone who's done that, and then you start thinking about the people who've actually had to put the labels on these kids' bodies, and that's like it shouldn't be. I understand why it is, but it shouldn't be a disposable image. If we don't see these things, if we don't record these things, then it's not. It doesn't allow it to happen again, but it certainly doesn't help in stopping it. There's a series of works. I've put some of them online, but not the hardest ones. They're called The Hand of Man. This is what we're capable of. I've even sold some of them. Because some people obviously they have that empathy for the kind of situation that the unluckiest and the most unfortunate in our sort of society end up, probably invariably ending up dying at the hand of. So when someone buys it, yes, it's a kind of sort of a validation of me making it. Sometimes I don't set out to sell them. This was a collector who said, "I like this. Can I have it?" I said, "Yeah, sure, you can." I trust you. You want that for the right reason. That's cool. Yeah, I'll sell that to you. And I'll sell it at a ridiculous amount because just to say I've sold it to you, right? It's not, So, how do we get onto this miserable subject?
It's just like talk about the content and the inspiration of the arts and things. Yeah, so it kind of covers it quite nicely, actually. Yeah.
A lot of stuff. Obviously, I've got this is my job. Mm-hmm. I am not of an independent income, so yeah, I have to make money. So I do stuff that kind of skirts, that sort of line between. I want to make something that says something, but I've also got to make something that someone can live with on their wall because you want them to buy it. Mm-hmm. I don't want to make wall decoration. There's plenty of artists that do that. I don't have a problem with it. It's like music. There's a million genres of music for different things. If I want, if I go to a funeral, I don't want to hear Skrillex. Similarly, if I want to dance like an idiot, I'm not going to put on Mozart's Requiem. It's horses for courses. I think we're very much stuck in that kind of sort of idea of, if you're an artist that makes, works in a medium, you have to pander to an audience. This is what you do. And it's like, why? Perhaps I'm lucky, like I say, I wasn't discovered until I was in my 40s. So I've done a lot of things. And people say, you can't do that. I said, well, I was doing it 20 years ago and nobody said anything. So, I don't care. I'm trying to think of a good example from music land. I go back to Adam Ant. You look at Adam Ant's early stuff. There's all the. I must admit, at the time, I was guilty of it as well. All the purists going, "Oh, the new stuff's just commercial shit." It's like, listen to this, and it's like, well, no, it was theatre. It was theatre. It's this sense of like the theatricality of what he was doing. It was like, it was great for it. I mean, I know so many punks, like the Crass and the Conflict, all the Hedge Monkeys, all the Crusties. I know so many from my age and a bit younger. So those that were sort of born in 64 to 67, who were like really into Crass. Basically, their clothes were so dark. Basically, they sucked the photons out of the sky. Just like they wore Dead Men's Paratroop boots. The ones. I was part of it. But at home, they did have an Adam and the Ant album because they liked it. Because but you did, you loved it. It was good music, and again, it was like he was. I think. I mean, that his first album. That is still an album that I listen to regularly and absolutely love it. I mean, Dirt Wears White. It was when I first heard that. That was one of the most original things I'd ever heard in my life at that time. I'd never heard anything like it. It did, when people sort of, I think they're like, which song is it? I think punk is an overused word. That's one of the lines in one of the.
It's not B-side Baby, is it? I know the line. I can hear the tune in my head.
It's there, but yeah, it's right. It's like punk's got to be this. Why does it? The very nature of punk is that it can be what you want. And I think there was that. There's. I mean, the whole Kings of the Wild Frontier thing. It was theatre. Why is that wrong? What?
It's actually more of an art school. Yeah, it's more of a weirder record, really.
Right, I think Dirt Wears White Socks is more art school. I mean, Kings of the Wild Frontier, I think, is full on. It's like, if you want to mix genres, you've got camp, sort of glam rock and punk in the same bucket. It was, and there's a bit of sort of Western kind of sort of. You have Marco's guitars there, which just sounded like they rolled straight off the sort of rock and roll, distorted, sort of 50s trailer. I mean, it was mental stuff. It was brilliant,
Yeah. So I guess to finish off, really, because we're an hour in, so it's an hour's good length. So where's the art going? Do you feel it's going on a journey, or is it basically, is it like Adam Ant? Can you actually move it in these kind of big strange jumps, or is it like Sell Out with the Ramones were the other days, where you just completely, you have this thing you're so good at, but you keep finessing it down to a perfection?
You want to do both, really, don't you? You want to get better at what you're doing, but you want to find new avenues as well. It's like that sort of sense of like, I'd like to do film. Well, I haven't got the equipment, I haven't got the time, I haven't got the money, so let's try and bring aspects of what I like in film into my art, into my visual art. So I'm looking now, it was odd, I've got an exhibition on at the moment where they wanted some of the old work as well. And usually galleries don't want old work, they want the new stuff. But they said, can we have some of the old stuff? Cool. So we put that in there, and they put the new work in there. And it was the first time where I saw work that was from, 10 years ago with the new work. And I'm starting to see a connecting thread. And it's the first time I'd ever seen it. Someone described a certain aspect of one painting that seemed different from all the rest. They asked what it was. And when I explained what it was about, I understood then. It's like, wow, even though it's different from everything else I'm doing, it actually has a very specific relationship to this work. And then I realized, yeah, I am on a road.
Yeah.
Starting to sound like a sort of hippie man. I'm on a road, you know. So yeah, there is a path, there is a road, there's somewhere I think I want to go. Same with all the art, but yeah, I want to focus more. I think I want to focus more, but I want to bring in other things outside of art. So I want to bring in my organized noise. I want to bring in my writing, and I want to use more often. I've actually dug them out. Well, I know. So my stencils, you know, with the good old, the best font in the world. I don't know who came up with the crass font, but it's the best font in the world.
Well, that's how they started with the stencils before the music, wasn't it? They were stenciling underground stations in London.
Yeah, you know, I've got piles of stencils here. I could sit there and I've got piles of texts that go back, you know, donkey's years. You know, some of them I'll never use again. If I mention, you know, why it says "you be naughty" in there, if you mention that to a kid now, they just look at you like, you know. So, but yeah, so it's bringing in. Yes, I know where the path is. I know what I want to do, but now I think I've got the confidence to argue why I can bring my music, my poetry, and going back, justifying bringing it all in with the connection to the punk thing at the beginning, all in, fine, into one line. We hope.